The Boat Biz podcast with the MRAA. We have some incredible content lined up for you with this podcast that we're going to be delivering industry updates, insights that boat dealers need to be aware of, opportunities that dealers can take advantage of, and our favorite part here at the MRAA, actionable ideas that you can implement. First and foremost priority for us in everything that we do here at the MRAA is to deliver on our mission. And that mission is really to recognize that if our industry is going to be successful, our dealers have to be successful. So we drive the success of our dealers. It's something we're very passionate about here. And the way that we look at things around here, it's always a great time to be in the boat biz. All right, welcome everybody to episode 9 of the Boat Biz podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Actually, if you're keeping track at home, you might be thinking that this could be actually episode 17, and I think you'd probably be right because we did 8 sessions, 8 episodes. Then we did 8 special episodes at Dealer Week this past year. Definitely want you to check those out. We had a guest professional podcaster. Unlike myself, I'm not so necessarily professional with this, but those podcasts were with some of our favorite partners, companies that really help make MRAA go and support the organization and the work that we do. So if you haven't heard those yet, you definitely need to tune into those and check those out. So here we are, actually episode 17 already. Seems like a lot in a short amount of time, but super pumped to be sharing these stories and these insights with you all. And I'm really, really excited to feature our guest today. Our guest is Matt Radich. Matt's the president of Active Water Sports out in Oregon. Matt, welcome.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I was actually really excited when you asked me about this. And yeah, if I can share any information that gets people kicked into gear on this, on the advocacy side, I'll be happy.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you spending the time with us. Why don't we kick it off a little bit today? Tell us a little bit about kind of how you arrived as president of the organization and kind of the history leading up to that.
Yeah, so Active Water Sports started in 1982. Warren Freese started Active Water Sports because he needed to figure out how to fund his water ski adventure. Started as an instructor and then selling boats and gear and all that. So I've actually been involved with Active Water Sports since 1992. So going way back.
Yeah.
Started right out of college because it sounded like a cool job, selling water skis and wakeboards. So many years later, I've worked myself into the role of president. Probably one of the reasons just because I like to take on new challenges, and I'm not afraid of that. So we have 3 shops in the Portland, Oregon area and 1 shop in the Central Oregon area, just opening a shop in Redmond, Oregon. We sell Supra, Moomba, Malibu, Axis, and Nautique boats. We have full pro shops with all the gear at all locations, and 2, soon to be 3 service shop locations, opening a new one over in Central Oregon. So we're really involved all the way across the board, from sales, service, pro shop. Really built our kind of reputation on customer service and just being a fun place to buy a boat.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great story. And I got to imagine we're going to dive into this a little bit, just with the basis of this conversation on the leadership that you kind of exemplify throughout our industry. I got to imagine the voice that you're using out in the industry to advocate for our sport and for boating and wake surfing and so forth was one of those attributes that kind of led you to the role that you're in today, the leadership and the exercising the voice. Am I right?
That's a great question, and it's different. I'm probably more of a kind of I would certainly consider myself more of a behind the scenes type of person. I like to just put people in good places and let that work. And I'm going to actually, for me and on the advocacy side, I'm going to give a big credit to the WSIA and specifically, he's not there anymore, but Larry Meddock. Yeah. Larry Meddock called me and we were just chatting as things were really ramping up in Oregon, probably 5 years ago, I want to say. And he did a great sales job on why I needed to be the subject matter expert in Oregon for all this stuff. And he was kind of actually started by kind of talking about what they need out there. And I'm like, yeah, who would that be? Like, who could we come up with? And then, he kind of, it rolled into, that's you. That's, and I kind of, I don't want to say begrudgingly, because I knew something had to be done. And I think this is what we need to work on.
Right.
I knew somebody had to do it, and I knew something had to be done. So it was really Larry kind of, I don't know what would be, kind of around.
Larry's always had a way of lighting a fire under people. And
Yeah, he did, but he did it in a very like exciting way. And then he became like my biggest cheerleader for like, oh, you're doing great. Let's just keep doing this. So that's really where it started. And I never considered myself someone who would be out there in front talking and doing that. But I would say one of the reasons that it's been successful here is it goes back to one of my things is surround yourself with people who are better than you at things, and it works out well. So that's what we've done. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I think, for our listeners out there, Matt and I wanted to really kind of talk about today the importance and the significance of the advocacy work that our industry has to do to support our businesses, to create a positive selling environment and a great boating environment for our customers, and so on and so forth. And, we think about in this business oftentimes the critical competencies of selling boats and servicing boats and taking care of customers and making sure our financials are good and that sort of thing. But there's a whole nother arm out there of advocacy that is a very, very critical part of what we should be thinking about and what we should be paying attention to and participating in as we represent our industry, represent our business, and work with legislators and regulators and so forth. And there's a little bit of an intimidation factor that people can have in talking about that. But, I think, Matt, you and I met probably a year or two ago officially. Prior to that, I was at a WSIA event a number of years ago. And at that event was participating in an advocacy session, and the importance of using your voice and the importance of talking and meeting with legislators and fighting for our industry and our sport. And we didn't get a meet at that time because you kind of got swarmed after that session, because the speaker kept referencing you and the work that you were doing and what a great job you were doing and so forth. But I remember being so impressed with how active you were and how willing you were to speak up and participate. You told us a little bit about how Larry pulled you into it and so forth, but tell us a little bit about those early days of using your voice and starting to fight for boating and that sort of thing. How did it go?
At first it started slow, just really kind of learning who we needed to talk to in the area, who we could connect with, who we could partner with on our side. So it was, fairly kind of organic at that point. And, in hindsight, I wish we could have started a little, got the ball rolling a little faster. And it's easy for me to say this, but faster and earlier. Right. And I think that's the key that I've said lots of times is, even if you don't have issues in your area with any kind of restrictions coming up, you will soon. Whoever's listening to this, you're going to have them coming. So don't pretend it's not there. So it was a kind of a slow growth process. And as we got more people involved, kind of, I guess what I would say is professionals in the industry of spreading the word. So, hooked up with a communications firm here locally, hooked up with some lobbyists locally, and we learned a lot about the process, which really isn't as logical and rational as anyone would think when it comes to making laws in a state and regulations. It's not at all. So right. Being out there and talking with people is key. The first trip I took down to the state capitol, which to me was like, we sell boats and fun. Why am I at the state capitol talking to state legislators? And I'll never forget one of the state legislators. She said to me, and I don't remember her name, so I can't reference her exactly, but she said to me, like, her exact words were, "You guys are getting your butts kicked on the PR side." That's what she said to me, and because in Oregon's, and other states as well, but in Oregon very much so, they use environmental concerns, which there has been no actual basis of, like, your boats are doing this, but it's easy to paint it with a broad brush. So, but when she said that to me, it really dawned on me that it's not based on a scientific study or anything like that. It's what word is out on the street. And if it's not our words that are out on the street, it's someone else's. And so in Oregon, the narrative was set that tow boats, wake boats, surf boats specifically are ruining Oregon. And that tone was set with those legislatures starting 2 or 3 years before we'd even introduced ourselves.
Right.
So and that's really what we learned, is that if we're not setting the narrative, someone else is.
Right.
And we're not going to be on the good side of that. So
absolutely. That resonates in a lot of ways. I mean, I know that there's a common saying around our industry that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. That somebody else recently said that people are surprised when the government shows up for your business and comes after your business, and it happens. It really happens. Walk us through a little bit of what were some of those first issues. What did you go to the Capitol to talk to them about? What were some of those first issues that you were active in?
So in the Oregon, or in the Portland area specifically, market, I don't know what I would say 80% of our customers are using their boats on the Willamette River, which runs, pretty much right down the middle through the whole Portland metropolitan area. It's not that, wide of a river. It's probably, 500 to 600 feet wide, at the good spots. So obviously there's some issues as far as once you get a lot more people on the water. So for a long time, there's been a push to restrict boating, restrict size of boats, restrict, waves. So in the kind of earlier 6-7 years ago, we were really just going down to introduce ourselves and to make sure that people knew it was more than just one guy plowing down the river in the boat. There's families that do this. There's businesses that have jobs. So we're just kind of rolling that out and introducing it. But we found that we were, basically we'd already been vilified at the Capitol. So we had a big hole to dig ourselves out of. And that is a lot more difficult than starting on a level playing field.
Right. So I think that's a perfect starting point. When we look at these issues, oftentimes it's not until the issue is already, completely on fire that people want to get involved. And by then it's often too late, right? Either a rule's been passed or a bill's been pushed through or whatever. And at that point, it's really kind of too late. So what recommendations would you have for people to start those conversations, to get to know some of these decision makers and so forth before the fire has started?
Absolutely. That is the best time, because you can however you want to say, you can move the needle more if you're doing that from when there is no issue. Because so the first thing that I would tell people to do, and there's a couple steps here, and it's get rid of your business ego and your competitiveness, and build relationships with your competitive dealers in the area. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go to company picnics together, but have a key stakeholder, and each one reach out to each other and build a relationship, because that one's about making sure the whole pie stays large and doesn't get shrunk. So you can worry about your slice of the pie separately, but that one's like the whole pie. You're going to get more if your market share is 20%. You're going to get more if the pie is bigger.
Right.
So establishing those relationships with the other local dealers is probably the place to start and key, because you can share resources. From there, you need to know who makes the rules on the water in your area. For us, it's the Marine Board, the Oregon State Marine Board. But also for most people, if there's going to be a boater the people who make the boat regulations, but also a state legislator. So unfortunately, some of ours have gone all the way up to the state the state legislature. So know who's going to make the rules, even if it's all the way down to homeowners association.
Right.
You want to know every layer that can affect your business. You want to know who those people are. And it's ideal if you meet them when there's no issues.
Right.
Because you can almost diffuse what you know, well, what you and I know is going to come. They may not know it, but what you and I know is going to come. So whatever the hot topic is in neighboring states, whether that's invasive species, erosion, safety, it comes from all different angles. So you can, use the resources that NMMA, WSIA, MRAA have put together, great resources to help us. So if you can get in there before there's an issue, you can tell them like, hey, these are some of the things we hear, but we just want to make sure you understand this, how it works. And there's families out here that are doing this, and all the good press we have, there's lots of great stuff out there. So making sure that is given to these people and talked through and introduced, and they know you're real people and real families. If we could have done that in Oregon, or if I would have done it and you had the foresight, we would definitely be ahead of where we are now. And I know one problem that I've heard multiple times is like dealers don't want to bring up bad news with their customer base or each other. Like, we're just going to ignore this, and we're just going to keep selling because we don't want to give people a reason not to buy a boat. While there is a bit of logic to that, it doesn't pan out well. That's a losing game for sure.
Yeah. A lot of times people will feel a little bit like unsure of themselves, not know how to navigate a process like that. Even if they knew who to talk to, it might feel a little intimidating for them to get involved. What insight would you have for them on what is that game like? What is the reality of that situation when you go talk to somebody who's making the rules about boating in your area?
We've met all kinds. There's going to be, the good ones, the ones that are in charge of this are very receptive to new information. Just go with the assumption that they want to hear from you. They need this information. You're going to run into some people that are very opinionated, one way or another, and you're just going to have to deal with them as they come. But it's not difficult. It's not difficult. It's not, no one's going to yell at you if you reach out to them. Once you do it a couple of times, you realize that it's really easy, and you're just sharing all the good parts of what we do. You're just sharing that with people to make sure they know that and they understand that. So it's not, it's easier than selling boats at the boat show. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah, so, a lot of times they want to hear from their constituents and hear what's going on and get to know them a little better, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've been super involved with all of this and so forth. What are the hot topics right now that you're working on or that you're dealing with the most?
For us, it's really wake surf boat waves. That's what it is in Oregon right now. Luckily, we haven't had a big invasive species issue yet. I'm sure that's coming. So we're doing some work on that too. But it's wake surf boats and wake surf, specifically wake surf boat waves. And there's been a lot of restrictions put in place in Oregon. So
that's an issue out here in Minnesota. I know it's an issue in a lot of different states. Right now we're fighting it. What is the status of where you're at with it, with everything on those issues?
We're in a spot where there's always something going on. Last year at the Oregon State, at the legislative level, they passed some new laws in Oregon that greatly restricted I don't even want to say wake surf boats, but towboats with any kind of ballast system. So towboats were really restricted on the river. So we on probably the most popular stretch of about 35 miles of the most popular stretch of river, you can't use a boat there for towed sports if it weighs more than 5,500 pounds with ballast. So there's like that really cuts everything out but a tournament ski boat.
Right.
So that passed last year, and after we put up a really, I think we put up a really good fight. It was one of those surprising things that it wasn't the law that they passed. It wasn't passed based on logic and sound thinking. It was passed based on emotion and environmental groups getting involved in politics and all those things. So you have to go into it with your eyes open. It's not facts that sway,
Right.
decisions. So right now in the state legislature, we have a bill in the Oregon, it's in right now to modify those laws that were and open some of the river back up. So we've been on the defensive, but we've actually, through lots of hard work and meeting people and supporting campaigns, we have some a specific state senator who's helping us driving the way to get some of that change. So we've never been on the offensive before, always on the defensive. So it's a different take.
Yeah, it's a whole different world being on the offensive. I mean, again,
Yeah.
we're too long. We're always on the defensive, and
Yes.
somebody's coming after us.
Mm.
What were some of the keys to finding that, the person that's writing the bill for you or working in your favor? What were some of the keys to finding them and getting them to activate on your behalf?
The keys were, really talking with as many as possible, talking with as many state legislators as possible, and then finding the ones who actually understand what you're saying, have taken the time to listen, and are willing to get engaged. And really that comes down to also supporting their campaign, being there when they need some support. They will be more receptive to that. But like this senator here that's working with us, he was supportive of our cause even before that, because he actually listened and tried to understand what the laws were they were trying to pass. And he's in the area of the two dealers, Active Water Sports and Northwest Boat Sports, who are the two big tournament boat dealers in the Portland market. But we're kind of, our businesses are constituents of his. So he took notice and took the time to learn and understand, and realized that there was some huge unintended consequences from these laws they passed. And now he's helping to try and get those tweaked so they're a lot more palatable for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you, when you think about these issues, whether it's the wake surfing, whether you think it's the invasive species or whatever the issues are, how do you translate that into what will this mean for my business? Right. I mean, there's always a business impact on this, and it's hard to calculate, I'm sure. But how does that translate?
Well, I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's really twofold. How is it going to affect my future business? Which anytime there's a restriction, it's going to affect your business in some way. Is that one sale? Is that 10? Is that 50% of your sales? It depends on the law. So there's that. And then there's also, can all these people that we've sold boats to use them somewhere close? When we're out there, and the group that we have here in Oregon, when we're out there fighting, it's not just so we can sell more, it's so our customers who we sold boats to can use them. But it is, we have seen a significant impact to our the towboat business. And obviously in the last year, there's been all sorts of hurdles, but this is just another one that's been fairly great. I mean, if you look at the registration numbers in Oregon, they're down significantly, even compared to, nationally. And I would point to the restrictions that we saw that we're now trying to reverse as a reason.
It's such a difficult situation to be in for the government to make those rules, and they impact your business so significantly. Are you seeing, I know we talked a little bit about with wake surfing and the invasive species, are you seeing other issues starting to pop up elsewhere? I know we said there's always something else coming around the corner. Are you starting to see other things that are impacting the business dynamics or the boating dynamics or anything like that that are on your radar?
For us, yeah, it's the same. It's the same issue. It's wake surf boat waves,
Yeah.
but now it's just expanding. Where what it just used to be on the Willamette, now it's moving over to some lakes in Central Oregon, which so that's growing. That for us, that's really the issue. It's wake surf waves.
Right.
It's different everywhere, but wake surf waves are going to lead to some future restrictions. I know it, so we just have to keep on it, and keep pushing back against that, and also acknowledging that, for us, for the wake surf wave issue, it doesn't help to want to ignore it or then face it and say, like, there's no problem. There's no problem with these waves. There is. At best, they're a nuisance. Right. The people who don't wake surf. Right. So we have to acknowledge that and really work on some real cooperative solutions.
Right.
And if you don't, you're going to end up with what we have in Oregon, which is,
right.
Just restrictions.
Right. And you mentioned the cooperative solutions. I know we've got a great collaborative relationship with WSIA, with NMMA, and we've worked together. And part of the point of that is, hey, look, you're not out there on your own. There's other resources that are available to you. The industry is supporting and that sort of thing. How does the industry support play into what you're doing?
It's great. All the WSA, NMMA, MRAA, we use resources because you guys know what's happening all around the country. You know what won and what produced a win in an area and what didn't, and how, really how to work those things. So pulling in those resources is absolutely key when you're starting this, because there's no reason right now to completely start from scratch. There are resources that can help with this. And, I think I've told you that, Matt, in the past, if there's a dealer out wherever in the country that wants to reach out to me, feel free. Yeah. I'm happy to point to the resources, like, hey, or talk to the WSA about this, talk to the NMM about this. MRAA is great here, all that.
Yeah, well, we can go back to one of the first questions I asked you about how you got into the leadership role, and you talked about I learned, yeah. And sharing that wisdom and that experience with us has been something that we've been really grateful for. And I know we recognize you with an award at Dealer Week this past year. What are some of the other accomplishments that you feel like have been things that you can be proud of over the years and working on some of these advocacy issues?
I'll be honest. We've had more losses than wins in Oregon. That's the truth of it. But also, I know that we would be in a much different place, much more restrictive place, if we hadn't continued to push back and continue to push back. Because through that and through the pushing back and making your voice heard, you do win advocates over time. People do start to care about it. So it is tough to when you ask me that question about what are the kind of thing in Oregon, it's like I said, yeah, more losses than wins, but we are making a difference. And I think that's what it comes down to. Probably for me, personally, it's just all the relationships that I've built, not only with, you would be an example, all these people that I met, the WSIA, NMMA, I've built relationships, all those things through just kind of sticking with it. I have now a way better relationship with our other local dealers. Brian McLean at Northwest Boat Sports. I'm on the phone with him all the time, and we're just figuring out how to keep the pie larger. So it's the building relationships has really been an enjoyable and rewarding part of this, because the more you do that, the more also that you realize you can make a difference, and that you're not, just stuck with it all. You're not carrying the weight all yourself. So, yeah, and setting those up, that would be it, if that's kind of a roundabout answer.
I know. So the relationships and the resources and that sort of thing that have supported you, where would you recommend? I know we've mentioned the three organizations a few times now, but is there a specific point or website or resource that you would point dealers to that would help them get started?
Not specifically, because okay, so as far as like going back to one of my things, like surrounding yourself with good people, probably the most important decision that we made locally, which when you're just starting this out, it's tough. Like, why am I spending money on this? Why am I investing my time in this? Well, so you don't, end up where we are in Oregon. But the one of the most important decisions we made was bringing on a communications firm. So Kristen McRosty with Quinn Thomas is our connection, and she is masterful at just the communications angle and making sure we're positioned. So that's where Oregon Families for Boating came from. Right. Brian McLean and I said we need to do more for this pie, and so we brought on a communications firm. And her, not only is she they have a towboat and their family out on the water, and she's a wake surfer, so that was perfect, but she's an expert in coalition building and right. spreading the good word. So that is key, that you engage people to whatever level that understand that game, because that game is completely different than the boat sales game and what we do, the water sports game. And so
for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to me on what could we do better to arm dealers to be better prepared to talk with decision makers, to push back, to use your words, to make sure that we have more wins than we do losses as we go forward with whatever the issue is, wake surfing, tax issues, whatever it might be? What advice might you have for that?
Another great question.
And I'm recording this, so you can actually hold me accountable if you want.
Yes. I think the coming restrictions specifically for wake boating are one of the biggest hurdles, outside of the economy. It is the biggest hurdle outside of the economy that we are facing. And for the MRAA, I would say putting a proactive person or program in place where you are actually actively grouping dealers together and saying, hey, we're going to get these 4 dealers on a phone, on a Zoom meeting, and like connected. We're going to force the connection. We're going to force you guys to start doing this. And it's difficult in some areas. It's, there's probably areas you don't know about that are just waiting for something like that to happen. So if with just, get a little kindling going and light that up and then let it go from there. Because most of the boat dealers that I know, certainly the successful ones, are very competitive. Yeah. And you can work together with other dealers in your area and still be competitive. You can, right. From there, it's like, how do we win this game of public relations and legislation? So that would be my challenge to you, is actually setting a program where you actively connect people in a market and maybe tell them, like, hey, here's what's happening in the neighboring states. This is coming your direction. Here's some people you should meet and say hello to, and start by setting it up and then see how it goes from there. Mm-hmm.
I love it. So I'm gonna wrap this up with a question here in a minute. I'm gonna ask you to give a pitch to dealers on why this should be of utmost importance to them. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll give you a second to think about that. Before we do that, are there other areas of this subject that we should be talking about today in this podcast? Are there other topics or points that we should make, conversations we should have related to either a specific legislative or regulatory issue or the broader subject of advocacy work and that sort of thing? Is there anything else that we didn't cover?
Oh, I'm sure there's lots of stuff we didn't cover, but I think, if we went down the road of what's happening in Oregon, that's not the point. There's lots of little details all along, but the key, I think the takeaway from this is we all need to get involved. And it doesn't, I would not, 10 years ago, I would not have considered myself an advocate of anything. I mean, like, yeah, I love to get out on the water and I do those things, but I wouldn't have, if somebody would have told me this is what you're going to be doing in 2022 and 2023, I would have said, like, no, that's not what, I don't enjoy that. And I don't do that. It's not like any boat dealerships have hired, PR experts and advocacy experts, and there's no one that has an in-house lobbyist. It just has to start. We just have to start doing it. We have to accept that this is now a part of being a boat dealer.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I think you hit on a key point there in that, we could talk about Oregon, but there's, 49 other states here that people might go, well, that doesn't concern me, but it does.
Yeah.
I had a dealer here in Minnesota say, hey, listen, I don't sell wake surf boats, so that issue doesn't impact me. But then what happened at the legislature was they restricted. I'm sorry, it was a local governing body for Lake Minnetonka. What they did was they restricted all boats to a greater no wake zone. So it was about wake surfing at the beginning, and people said, well, that doesn't concern me. And then all of a sudden it concerns everybody because there are these much larger no wake zones. At this moment, we have an issue that the FTC has brought up in that it's called the auto rule, but because of the very broad definition that they have of motor vehicle dealers, they are potentially going to change the way that we sell and finance boats, and it will impact every single dealer in the nation. And when we went out with the notice about this back in September of last year, we got fewer than 1% of the dealers who said, hey, I want to speak out on this because this would be bad. And it would be really very, very bad for our dealers. There's another issue along the Eastern Seaboard with a protected whale species that ultimately could end up being the single greatest restriction to boating access that we've ever seen in our lifetimes. And we're trying to get people to activate and speak out and participate in very, very important advocacy work. So with all of that kind of set up, I'll go back to that question is, what is the pitch? What is the message that you could send to your colleagues at other dealerships about how important it is for them to participate in their advocacy work, to use their voice, to exercise their voice, and to fight back against some of this legislation before it becomes a fire?
Yeah. At its most basic, if you plan on doing business in 12 months, maybe you're going to retire at the end of the year, and it doesn't matter. But if you plan on whatever your business is, if you plan on it being successful next year and the year after that and the year after that, you have to get involved with local area, state area advocacy to stop restrictions that are coming down the line. And some people might say, well, they're going to come either way. That's not true. You could slow them down, you could change them, you could massage them into what you want. But if you focusing on this is just as important as focusing on how many boats you're going to sell this month. What's your service shop, efficiency rate? Has your pro shop hitting their sales goals? This is going to drive all those things. So you must get involved. So this isn't a question of should I or should not. And that's my point here. It's not, no one should be this shouldn't be a decision for anyone whether they're going to get involved. It should be like, how involved am I going to be? How or who in the organization is going to be the point person on this? And no one probably is going to volunteer and be like, oh yeah, this is perfect. This is right up my alley. But all it takes is someone who is generally organized, is good at talking with people, and wants to see their business grow. And this is what we have to pick up. So
very well said. Very well said.
Mhm.
Man, I want to just thank you for the leadership and the example that you've set for us and for the industry. It's inspiring. It's making a difference. And like you said, if we weren't out there pushing back, things would be far worse than what they are. But you've given us a template, and you've given us examples of how we can do that, fight back, and exercise our voice in states across the country. And we really, really appreciate all that you're doing there and leading the way. So thank you for that. Thank you also for joining us for this episode of the Boat Biz podcast. We appreciate you taking the time. I know it's post-boat show and it's busy season and all that. I appreciate you carving out an hour for us. So just thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Also, just want to say thank you to all of you for joining us here for the Boat Biz podcast, episode 17, all wrapped up here. If you want to get involved with advocacy, we are here to help you do that. We're here to help either connect you with other dealers like Matt, with the resources that you need. You heard Matt throw down the challenge to start connecting people, and we're going to start doing that as well. We're going to help get this industry to speak up and exercise its voice on a higher level. So we look forward to doing that. If we can help you make that happen, we have lots of ideas on how we can do that. So please feel free to reach out to us anytime. But for all of us here at the MRAA, thank you, Matt, once again for joining us. Thank you for tuning into the Boat Biz podcast. See you soon.